wrongful use, possession, or distribution of a controlled substance. You might be able to get away with those other four. You could be able, potentially. But if you do this one, they're gonna kick your out. In the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that could be considered a racial slur. That's a flash in the pan. Like, we don't do that no more. What is poppin', guys? Your boy Baby Bro, and I'm back with another video for you guys, man. In today's video, I got five shocking things that you cannot do in the United States military. Let's get to the video. Before I start each and every video, I'd like to thank all my supporters, returning and the new supporters. You guys make this channel what it is, and I appreciate you guys. I still can't believe that we are about 5,500 subscribers right now. So I appreciate you guys, and hopefully you influence other people to like, comment, and subscribe to the videos. Without further ado, let's get to number 5. The number 5 thing that you cannot do in the U.S. military is engage in any acts of homophobia or homophobic ideologies. So the military has a very dark past with homophobia.
Even before a federal judge refused the government's request to halt her order, putting a stop to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the Pentagon made history for the first time, ordering its recruiters to accept gay applicants. In Times Square, that meant Dan Choi was looking to get back in uniform, the one the Iraq veteran was kicked out of under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He showed up at an Army recruiting center Tuesday and went through the paperwork to enlist.
I was discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell that I'm gay and I intend to serve openly and honestly, and they continued processing me.
It's a different experience than the one Omar Lopez had at a Texas recruiting office a few days ago. He too was discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
I will be asking if I can get reinstated.
But in a video posted by a group called Get Equal, a recruiter turned Lopez away.
You gotta understand, the news is, that's just publicity. That doesn't necessarily mean that changes happen right now. That's just something that they're talking about.
Under the Pentagon's new order, Lopez will try again.
I'm gonna go see a recruiter here soon, and I'm gonna place an appointment to see if I can get back in.
But recruiters and gay rights groups are also cautioning gay applicants that the judge's ruling could be reversed, which would mean they're violating Don't Ask, Don't Tell by coming out.
The Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was passed in 1993, which encouraged soldiers of gay, lesbian, LGBTQ+ community soldiers to serve as long as they remain closeted. That policy was repealed in September 2011. And has since been strictly adhered to, prohibiting members from saying anything or taking any negative actions to another service member because of the sexual preference. My thoughts on this. So, I think it is disrespectful, and I think it is irresponsible for any organization to ask someone to hide who they are, their sexual, to hide who they are because of sexual preference, right? When this law, I was around when this thing was repealed, and I remember a lot of soldiers going through a lot of stuff dealing with homophobia and homophobic attacks. So I saw this stuff firsthand, and I just to say I was disgusted. So the Army agrees with me on this because none of that stuff is tolerated now. Sure, some stuff slips through the cracks. You might hear somebody yell out like a homophobic slur, but for the most part, that stuff doesn't exist. People don't generally, from what I know, I try to, if it happens around me, I try to make sure that, that person is reprimanded who did it, and that the person who was done to understands that that's a flash in the pan. Like, we don't do that shit no more. So yeah, number 5 is homophobic and homophobic ideologies. Number 4 is probably my favorite. It's probably because I get asked this so much because of where I live at in Colorado. And number 4 is you cannot do drugs of any type. Illegal drugs, you cannot abuse prescription drugs. Wrongful use, possession, or distribution of a controlled substance is punishable by Article 112 Alpha of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, also known as the UCMJ, which means if you do drugs, you could face incarceration, dishonorable or bad discharge, or even death in the most craziest circumstances, and that's usually reserved for drug trafficking.
The use of illegal drugs or any other illegal activity goes directly against the Special Operation Force's values and does not reflect the behavior we demand from every soldier in our formation. We are taking measures at every level to ensure the health and welfare of our soldiers and to reduce these harmful behaviors.
With that said, I live in the state of Colorado. In Colorado, marijuana is legal for citizens and people that visit Colorado to use. It's for recreational use, right? They got marijuana shops everywhere. Now, the United States military, Air Force, and Army are both here. Peterson is across the city, and Colorado Springs is where I'm stationed at, Fort Carson. Marijuana is illegal on a federal base, right? And it's illegal for soldiers or airmen or anybody here that's federal to use marijuana. So that goes to say that for all drugs. So the number 4 thing that you cannot do, and please don't test the shit, because what they do in the Army is they do regular scheduled random drug tests. So usually they do about 10% of the formation. This last time I did one, they did the entire formation. So 100% of the people that were in a unit had to take a urinalysis. And I'm sure if you was doing drugs the other day, which is highly likely living in Colorado, that you probably pop hot and you probably gonna get in a whole lot of trouble for doing that shit. So please, number 4, guys, stay away from the drugs. Number 3, now this one is a bit of a sensitive topic because we hear it in our music, we hear it in movies, film, and TV shows, and it's something that we hear a lot, and a lot of us say this word a lot. But in the United States military, you are prohibited from using the N-word in any aspect.
Until I'm Mexican, so I could actually get away with it if I say N-I-G-G-A. But if I can't do the other one.
But you can't even say it. You can't, not even calling someone it. Not calling a person a nigger, but saying the word. Like me saying it right now. You're like,
you can't say it.
How come you can't say it?
He just did.
It's racist. It's racist.
No, it's
in any form of text, writing, speaking, anything, right? The N-word is a big no-no. All right, I know a lot of people say it in regular conversation between one another. A lot of people listen to it in their music, and it's one of them things that if you used to saying it, it's not nothing special to you. But in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that could be considered a racial slur. So I understand that it might not mean the same thing to different people, especially our younger generation who grew up saying that a lot more. But some of the older people won't take it like that. Some of these old people were around when like Martin Luther King was killed, or like they were around in the 70s and the 80s when racism was still a thing, or even some of them in the 60s. You got some of these generals that been around in the 60s with the enactment of the Jim Crow laws and all of the racial divides and segregation that took place in our country. So I know for some of you youngsters, this N-word is not a big deal, but it still could be taken as a racist term. So I would highly suggest that you stay away from it. Don't use it in conversation with other people. Don't walk around listening to music and saying it out loud. Stay away from that N-word or any other racial slur for that matter. But that N-word is a big one because I remember when it got really big for people getting in trouble for saying it during the George Floyd thing. A lot of our instructions came with a lot of safety and racial undertones because of that incident that happened with George Floyd, and then it just turned into a whole lot of other incidents that hit close to home with us. So, number 3, the N-word, don't use it. Okay, number 2 is going to be war crime. So if you don't know what a war crime is, it is a crime committed against our enemies or in a war zone to friendlies. So a lot of times we don't see war crimes as something that we've done to people. We always see it as something that someone's done to us, like Hitler doing the war crimes to the Jewish people, or like in Uganda, or Pol Pot in Cambodia doing war crimes and stuff like that. But the United States, Americans have been involved in war crimes. One prime example that I can think of right off the top of my head is the prisoners that were at Abu Ghraib. During this time, there were 11 soldiers that were convicted of war crimes associated with assault, torturing, and just straight up malnutrition and stuff, and just bad behavior. Like, I'm gonna show some of the pictures and some of the videos while we talking about it. But yeah, I remember this being like a really big thing. And I came from the army when during war, people were shooting dogs and shooting unarmed civilians. Those could be considered war crimes. So these days, it's taken a whole lot more serious than it used to be. I'm glad, because innocent people don't deserve to be treated like that. Even our enemies should be treated with some sort of dignity, because we represent American culture through our military, and sometimes that's the only semblance of our military that people see the semblance of the United States that people see is our military, because we're everywhere pretty much. So war crimes, that's a no-go. Don't do it. If you ever see it happen, report what you see. I'm not saying go tell on your chain of command every time they do or say something crazy, but use your own common sense and your own jurisdiction to figure out what a war crime is, and do your research, because you might be doing something now that could be considered a war crime and you don't even know it. So war crimes, number 2, that's a no-go. And number 1, this one is an absolute no-go. You might be able to get away with those other 4. You could be able, potentially, but if you do this one, they're gonna kick your ass out and you're gonna be through. And that is domestic violence. So don't beat up on your wife, your girlfriend. Same-sex marriages, the same thing. If y'all live together, y'all cohabitate together, and y'all get in a fight, that is domestic violence. The reason why this one is probably the most important is because if you are convicted of a misdemeanor domestic violence case, right? You convicted, right? It is a felony for you to carry a weapon after that misdemeanor. So even if your misdemeanor, if your domestic violence was a misdemeanor, it is a felony with the initiation of the Lautenberg Amendment. That's what it's called, the Lautenberg Amendment. So I've seen I ain't gonna say a lot. I've seen about 4 soldiers that went through this, and they went to the house, beat up on. One was a female that beat up on her husband. He called the police on her. She got the domestic violence misdemeanor charge. About 6 months later, she was out of the army. So because you can't, after you do that, you cannot carry a weapon any longer. You can't go nowhere. You can't even ship them shits. Like, you can't even be an armor in the arms room. So domestic violence is a big no-no. Please don't do it. Plus, it's just wrong, man. Like, if you get into an altercation with your significant other, or you into it with your girlfriend, and I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, this might be child abuse, but I want to say your kids fall under domestic violence too, because it's domestic housing. I don't know. Y'all, my legal people, y'all can say something in the comments about that. But listen, take you a little cooling off period. Every unit has what the First Arms Barracks program, and a part of the First Arms Barracks program is providing soldiers with dependents a cooling off room in case they get into it with they old lady or they old man or what have you, right? So they could go there, cool off, get their mind right, and they're not in the house beating up on their spouses, all right? Because that's just not something we do. That don't represent you well, and that don't represent the Department of Defense well. So domestic violence is a big ass no-no. Don't do it.